Hello and welcome back to Vindication Sports. I'm your host Jackson Hester, and I'm actually going to follow through on one of my threats. I threatened or hinted at, basically, that I was going to do a video about the Sacramento Kings in the tenure of Vlade Divac. Vlade Divac, I'm not sure exactly how it's pronounced, but regardless, we're going to talk about the former Sacramento Kings center, turned Sacramento Kings president of basketball operations, turned destroyer of worlds. I mean, essentially. Yeah. When I went through all the picks that him and his administration, I guess I'll just call it an administration that they made, they're almost all bad. I found two picks that I was happy with, that I thought that there wasn't much more value you could really get. Every other pick was either acceptable or terrible, and that's just not a way to keep your job. In my eyes, that's probably why he got fired, was his terrible drafting. His terrible drafting, in my opinion, also led to the rest of the trash decisions he made. And I'm not exactly sure what the thought process was behind hiring Luke Walton, firing your coach that almost brought you to the playoffs. I'm forgetting his name, but he was a kind of a good coach, if I remember. I think it was Dave Yeager, if I'm not mistaken, on how to pronounce that. He was a pretty good coach. I think he'll probably get another job in the NBA. I think he's probably better than someone like Tom Thibodeau is right now, even. I think that guy's kind of holding on to his job for no reason. I also think Kenny Atkinson, that's another head coach that got fired that probably has no reason to be fired. We'll just not get into Katie and Kyrie Illuminati because it's just a problem. But after I kind of like lay all that groundwork down, the Kings are just a dumpster fire. They've been a dumpster fire for a long time. They've got a couple of good players now. Actually, they've got one player that I think is particularly good. And he's got a really good attitude, and I think he's just kind of a franchise cornerstone. And that's like De'Aaron Fox. Obviously, we'll get to the 2017 draft? 2018 draft? Yeah, 2017 draft. And we'll get to all the drafts. I'm actually just going to go through all of them. He was only in control for a few drafts. So he assumed control of basketball operations in March of 2015. So we're just going to assume that he was the one and only person responsible for all this, just to make it easier. I'm sure he talked to a lot of people. I'm sure there was a lot of discussion that went down with the owners, with everybody, because basketball is not run by one person. But today we're going to pretend like Vlade Divac was in complete control, because he was the man who was at the helm of this ship. And where it ended up is just embarrassing. All right, so he inherited a terrible mess. That's pretty much undeniable. I believe DeMarcus Cousins was on the team already when the time he had it, but the previous years in 2013 and 2014, there was a lot of actually EuroLeague players that slipped through all the cracks, and I don't know if that has anything to really influence the owners to potentially get Vlade Divac, somebody who was a EuroLeague legend. I think he's a Hall of Famer because of all of his EuroLeague accomplishments. So I think after those drafts, that's when Vlade Divac really got full control. So we're not gonna blame him for the bad drafts of 13 and 14. But what we can blame him on would be his horrible drafting of Willie Cauley-Stein. He had, I think it was like the 6th pick or the 8th pick or something like that. And I don't know if they wanted a center because the DeMarcus Cousins thing wasn't working out, and Vlade Divac is a center, so he thinks, maybe I need a center. But if you're going to take Willie Cauley-Stein, you could probably get him later. I don't really remember what the hype was around him. Maybe he was seen as kind of the next transformative talent. I don't buy that at all. There was players like Miles Turner available. That's a reasonable pick, right? Because I'm not gonna call him out and say, "Oh, you should have picked Devin Booker," even though they definitely should have picked Devin Booker at 8 or whatever, because they could have had Devin Booker on their team, and that's way better than Willie Cauley-Stein ever was. The way I'm going to view this is that, drafting is a zero-sum game. You either win or you lose, and it's not really necessarily about how it actually plays out. in the basketball season. Like, drafting and team construction is a zero-sum game. There's only a certain amount of good players that are in the league, and when you lose out on them, there's not an easy opportunity to just pick one up, especially if you're a team like Sacramento. So I really am going to try to touch on the best players in each of the drafts. I'm going to try to use more realistic picks that they could have had, instead. That's why I didn't really come straight out with the Devin Booker thing, because, they were looking for a center clearly, which is just completely backwards, but that's what they were doing. But they also, missed on a player like Justice Winslow. He went to Duke. He was really well known. Getting him is better than Willie Cauley-Stein. I just think straight up, flat out. Justice Winslow would have been, he would have been better than he was if he didn't have as much talent around him, if that makes sense. Maybe he doesn't get hurt in Sacramento, even though kind of seems like the thing players do in Sacramento. Almost like people get hurt when they're unhappy. And then next year, there is a mildly bad Marquise Chris pick. I think Marquise Chris is not the worst player in the entire world, and there's not really too much value left in that draft for you. But, you missed on Domantas Sabonis, a Euro center, or power forward, a European big man, and I just cannot fathom how that happens, how you pick literal Marquise Chris over Domantas Sabonis. It's like he's the son of Arvydas Sabonis. You know who he is, Vlade. You literally know who he is. It's the same thing, and we'll get to it later. There's another notable Euro player that slipped through the crack under Vlade Divac's watch, and I'm sure you all know who that is. But, he passed on Sabonis, and there's really not too much else in this draft. There is Pascal Siakam needs to be mentioned because put some respect on Spicy P's name. But that's not a reasonable pick. The Masai Ujiri is his third eye is so far open that he doesn't even have a skull anymore. It's just the top of his head is his third eye. He can just see into the future, and he's learned how to tune it directly to basketball. One day we all hope to be, Masai Ujiri. But you know what? I only said this is mildly bad because this draft was generally terrible, and at least it wasn't Dragan Bender at 6 or whatever he got picked at, which definitely happened in the same draft. So you can't even be too hard on the Kings there. And then this year they actually have an okay draft, but it's completely... So they draft De'Aaron Fox with their high lottery pick. That's a great pick. He bullied Lonzo Ball in the one matchup they had that year. He's clearly a better point guard. He's probably the second best player in the class, third best player in that class. Maybe I'm forgetting people, but De'Aaron Fox he might be the second or third best player in that class. I think that's reasonable to say. It's Tatum, De'Aaron Fox, Donovan Mitchell. We're getting into a conversation there. I think De'Aaron Fox might be one of the fastest players in the league as well. So I think it's obvious. It was an obvious pick, like a great pick, honestly, because you can mess it up. Obvious, Kings have shown it time and time again. They can mess it up, and hey, they even messed up their second lottery pick. They fumbled the bag by picking Zach Collins, number 10 overall. Now, let me tell you why this is fumbling the bag. You want a power forward, all right? Oh, easy. A power forward. Okay. You could have had Kyle Kuzma, and you guys were saying, he went in the second round. They were never going to pick him. True. But you could have had John Collins, 4 picks later. He got drafted by the Hawks, 10 picks later, 14 picks later. He went to Wake Forest, I think, if I can remember correctly. He's way better than Zach Collins. You could have had Bam Adebayo. He was just 3 or 4 picks later. Now, I get it. The Heat are really good at drafting, but Kings are really messing up here. And then Donovan Mitchell was also available. It's not like you have a second guard. Was Buddy Hield your second guard? Buddy Hield can play 3 and shoot for those 2. It's you have to start recognizing, and I understand getting 2 point guards. Donovan Mitchell's a shooting guard, but getting 2 young guards is always difficult, and sometimes it can mess you up. And I know they've done that multiple guard thing before, but it's a problem of not picking the best players they can. That's really what it comes down to. Is they're letting the better players slip through the fingers. And in 2018, that's the most embarrassing thing he did. That's most likely why he got fired. He absolutely ruins the Kings' future by spending their number 2 overall pick on Marvin Bagley, who, in my eyes, is a complete total bust. We can have a large discussion about this, but I don't think there's really that much arguing it anymore. Marvin Bagley's really not on the level of any of the players in that draft class, like, say, DeAndre Ayton, who went number 1. It's not the best pick in the world, Suns. You honestly probably messed that up, fumbled it a little bit, but at least you didn't pick Marvin Bagley. Because at 3 overall, we have a transcendent potential MVP, Luka Doncic, going a Euro, big man, kind of a big man. He's like 6'7". He's a Euro player though. Vlade, that's why you got fired. And if you haven't recognized why you've been fired yet, that's it. It's that draft. And I know he came out and defended it again, but defending a stupid mistake is never justifiable. Ever. It's stupid, Vlade. Don't argue against it. I mean, maybe he sees something in Bagley that we don't see, right? That's the always what people are going to say. That's the thing they're going to go to, is that, maybe he just looks so good in scrimmages or just in practice. He's just a world beater. And it's like, okay, dude, Shaq made 50 free throws in a row at practice one time. It's like, what have you seen from Marvin Bagley in a game, though? Like, he had to share the court with, I forget his name. He plays for Chicago. Wendell Carter Jr. And, that limited his numbers, everybody said. But to me, I just say, like, if he can't get numbers, he can't get numbers. I don't know why we're trying to make this guy seem like he's something that he's not. And I get he was at Duke, and they're all sharing the ball, all really good. I don't think they won the championship that year. So, I mean, what are we hyping this guy up for, really? That's what I want to know, really. What are we hyping him up for? He said that they were like that him and De'Aaron Fox were going to be the next next KD Russell Westbrook, and to that I just say, that is peak comedy. And then I guess by 2019, and also didn't get Trae Young, but that was, Trae Young De'Aaron Fox thing probably would not work, to be honest. So, could have gotten Trae Young and traded him to us. Like, we wanted him pretty badly. I think we would have been stuck with Marvin Bagley. I can promise you the Hawks do not want to be stuck with Marvin Bagley, John Collins. That's just not ideal. But the Hawks are actually good at drafting, compared to the absolute horrendous mess that is the Kings. And the Hawks aren't very good at drafting. But at least they know how to draft a basketball team. They didn't just get lucky. The Kings didn't just get unlucky on all these bad picks. It just doesn't work that way. And then, like I said, by 2019, they pretty much decided, you know what? We don't need to draft. Every time we draft a player, they're terrible. So we'll just trade them all away to try to be competitive for some reason. And, we'll trade DeMarcus Cousins for Buddy Hield, who's pretty much ready to win now, even though the best player on our team is 21. I'm not exactly sure where this is going. Oh, yeah, it's going to Vlade Divac being fired. That's where it's going. They had no first-round picks in 2019. If they would have lucked out and gotten the number 1 overall pick, they would have gotten to keep their pick and pick Zion Williamson, but the lottery gods absolutely refused to favor a team that does nothing for itself. A team that leaves Devin Booker, Miles Turner, Domantas Sabonis, Donovan Mitchell, Bam Adebayo, John Collins, all these players on the table. Giannis was left on the table years before. It's egregious. It's absolutely egregious that Vlade cannot get this right. Vlade is not responsible for the no Giannis pick because he came into power in 2015 of March of 2015. But there are only 2 good picks the entire time. And when I say good, I mean like above average. You're not messing up. You're not losing player. You're not losing value on your picks. The De'Aaron Fox pick, and then they picked Gary Trent Jr. in the second round, and Gary Trent Jr. is not even on their team anymore. So anybody who was thinking, I wonder why Vlade Divac is fired, there you go. He's a shipwreck. The whole thing is just on fire, and I will be very interested to see who's going to take that over and fix it. Anyway, this has been Jackson Hester, and this is Vindication Sports. I'll see you guys next time.